My name is Dr. Kevin Pecca. I wanted to make a podcast that exposes people to the true miracles of life and health. All the guests on this show have been specially picked because they bring something positive to the world. They have some of the most amazing and inspiring life stories. These people have a passion for living, healing, and leaving the world better than they found it. There is something inside these people that made them keep fighting through all the tough times, even when people told them it was not possible. They carried on and made their lives beautiful again. And now they are sharing their experiences with the world. This is the Expect Miracles podcast. Enjoy the show. Galina Denzel is a movement specialist who has dedicated her life's work to helping people become free to move and enjoy life to its fullest. Her practice is focused on guiding people in acute and chronic pain to return to a life of functional movement after an injury, accident, or trauma. Galina is a Nutritious Movement certified restorative exercise specialist, a somatic experiencing practitioner, nutrition coach, and author and educator. She is the co-author of Eat Well, Move Well, Live Well, The Art of Real Food in Bulgarian, The Real Food Reset, and Man on Top in English. Galina and her husband Roland have a health coaching practice serving online clients worldwide and locally in Orange County, California. Galina and Roland write and podcast regularly at eatmovelive52.com. And their latest book, Eat Well, Move Well, Live Well, 52 Ways to Feel Better in a Week, is available where all fine books are sold. Please welcome Galina.
Hi, it's so good to be your guest.
I know, I'm so excited. You have such an interesting life story and just a true healer in every sense of the word, so I am just very excited for this podcast.
Thank you, me as well. I've been looking forward to it.
And the build-up has been nice, too. It's been tough to get a hold of you, so I'm very excited.
I am a moving target, Kevin.
I know. You're always on the run. So, Galina, where are you from?
I am originally from Bulgaria, which is in Eastern Europe, and no one knows where that is. So if you imagine Greece, because everybody knows where Greece is, Bulgaria is right on top of it. It's like a hat on top of Greece.
So it must be absolutely beautiful over there then, huh?
It is fabulous. It is a very small country, but we have such a variety of nature, really tall alpine mountains, kind of like Switzerland does. And then we also have the Black Sea coast, which is just beautiful and warm, unlike the Pacific Ocean. And you can go in and actually be very comfortable without a wetsuit. And it's just such a great variety of being close to nature. People in Eastern Europe live very close to nature. And it's just been such a great place to grow and develop. It's also been a very challenging place. And I've been in the States.
Why is that?
Well, I grew up in communism. You know, for people of my generation and younger in the States, that's a very vague thing. For me, it's reality. That's how we grew up. And
so what was that like growing up in a communist society?
Well, we know, like, when you're a kid.
Right,
and life is normal, and you have your mom and your dad and your extended family, and everything's cool, and you look forward to your birthdays. You know, kids are kids. I was 10 when communism went away. But I have become increasingly aware of the fear that was in society at all times, and the very difficult trying to make yourself small and keep yourself small to fit a model of society that was very much artificial and not very humanistic.
Yeah.
And also being very careful not to ruffle any feathers and not to shine in any way. So kind of like the opposite of what Western kids are taught.
Absolutely.
And so that's become, as I'm in my late 30s, I've become increasingly aware that kind of leaves an echo in your system.
Oh, absolutely.
And I have lots of compassion for how that's been for me, for my parents. But also, you know, it's interesting because there's such a big focus on, like, so there's a social importance. There's an importance of what society does and what the state does in communism. And there's not that much of an importance of who you are and who you are created to be and being who you are. And so my life has been this kind of pendulum swung the other way, where I'm really increasingly curious both about myself and others and who they are. So I've been in the States for just 6 years, since my early 30s. And it's been a very cool adventure.
Yeah. So how old were you when you moved over to the States?
I was 31.
31. Okay. So I'm just curious, did you get that sense, like, when you're out in Bulgaria at the time, did you get a sense like you had to walk on eggshells, or how did they get you to feel that way, to like play small?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting because you don't really know that as a child.
Right.
But your parents know it.
Right.
And so there's this constant, it was recently with a friend who's from Romania, which is the country like right next to us.
Yeah.
And they kind of suffered similar political circumstances. And her phone rang. And when she hung up, she looked at her phone again, and then she looked at her phone again. And then she looked at me and she said, do you check your phone like 3 times to make sure you've hung up? I'm like, oh yeah, like 5 times.
Really?
Because our phones were always listened to.
Wow.
So it's this, I know, so it's this, like as a kid,
yeah,
you're like, hang up the phone, did you hang up the phone? Hang up the phone.
Wow.
And so as a kid, you just grow up in it. You don't really know that it's abnormal, but then you become an adult and you're like, I am just hyper vigilant all the time and I don't feel safe. And so that shows up in your body, that shows up in our bodies, in our dreams, in the ways that we do life, in the ways that we are creative and bring our work into the world. And it's really neat, though. It's really neat having this wide range of human experience. And it also makes you more aware that there's many different worlds. Often people in the West, there's this sense here that this is the world and this is not the world. There's many worlds out there.
Yeah. Definitely. So, Galina, how did you get into healing?
Through my own pain, the classic path.
Yeah. What was going on with you?
I was a dancer. So I started dancing when I was 5. I was a classical ballet dancer in a very strict Russian classical ballet lineage that was incredibly demanding on a little body. Yeah. And it so happens that I have the kind of body that should you push it really, really hard, it starts to hurt. Yeah. There's people who have a lot of buffer there for pushing themselves, and we see them in the Olympics. Yes. Yeah, you wouldn't see someone like me in the Olympics. And so I was 11 when my back pain started. Really? And then shortly after, shoulder pain started. So I think I had probably like a good 20 years of chronic low back pain and shoulder pain. Wow. And it was really a challenge for how much I love moving and for how much I love being out in nature and running. And I was an exerciser as well, right? And exercising, and exercise was a part of my life. And I always wanted to be in good shape. I had great role models around me. And it was just heartbreaking that if you looked at me from the outside, I looked like I was in shape, but on the inside, I wasn't healthy. Right. And so little by little, I was 16 years old when I rented my first exercise studio. Cool. And I was teaching group exercise class after school. At 16, you were teaching classes? That's amazing. 16 years old. My rent was like $30 a month, I remember, for the studio. It was crazy. However, that wasn't my education life path that my family had envisioned for me or I had envisioned for myself. So no one ever took it seriously. It was like, oh, look how cute, she wants to teach exercise and she's 16. If I had a 16-year-old now and I saw them doing what I did then, I would be like, wow, how can we find the best exercise physiology program or somatic movement program, or what is it about movement that you love so much? And I would try to see how I can guide that. But, Eastern Europe is a weird place. There isn't much space for people who teach exercise and movement. And we are a country that really values intellect and being highly intellectual. And there's something about working with the body that culturally has been frowned upon. And so I don't know if it's like that. It used to be maybe like that in America 50 years ago. I don't know. But I didn't really start early. So I went to university, majored in English, and I got my bachelor and master's in British and American studies, which is kind of like literature and linguistics. That's interesting. Were you into it, or you just kind of did it just to get a degree and go to the next chapter? I loved English. Next to movement, the thing that I loved the most was English. Really? And so I just loved the language. I found it so much easier to express myself in English. Right. Yeah. I found it was shorter. It was sweeter. I loved writing poetry in English, much more so than in Bulgarian. And I started writing poetry when I was like in the 3rd grade. So I've always wrote poetry my whole life. And so I just found it an easier language to express myself. It's very strange. That's very interesting. And to this day, as somebody who writes, I write articles and blog posts and books. I would so much rather write in English than in Bulgarian. My Bulgarian editors hate my writing because it's It's like, what is this? This isn't even Bulgarian. And it's been really an interesting path. And I fell in love with English. And I also wanted to not do law. One of my goals was not to do law because I grew up in a home with a lawyer mother and seeing how hard that was on her. And she does criminal law to this day. And it's an incredibly hard life.
Oh, yeah.
And I just didn't want to have that. I didn't want to have that. And so I loved English. I was all in. When I love something, I'm all in. I become totally obsessed by it at the time that it owns me. And I was in it for several years, graduated, and then taught English and did translation and interpretation and translated movies.
Really?
I know.
That's great.
And I was miserable doing it. I was just not feeling alive. And I fell in love with going to the gym. I took a year between my third and fourth year at university and spent a year working on a tourist boat in the Caribbean.
Really? That must have been amazing.
It was fabulous. And so I was 22 and carefree, and it was amazing. And one of the men that I translated for in Bulgaria, I translated for some of his business contracts, had a business in the Cayman Islands, and I was sharing with him that I'm trying to choose an English-speaking country to practice my English for a year and to take a break from school. And he was like, why don't you come to the Cayman Islands? And I was like, well, sure. So I went.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I realized there working on his boat that I was really physically weak. Like,
really?
I didn't have a concept of strength. Like, I knew I could run. I had incredible cardio endurance. I could do some body weight stuff that was cool.
Yeah.
I could do the splits. I could do pistol squats, all the circus stuff. But I couldn't pull an anchor out of the water.
Right. Yeah.
Really, really, really weak.
I just want to say, what's interesting about that too is like people go to the gym and they work on their muscles and they think they're physically fit, and then they go to like a yoga class or Pilates and they just can't hang at all because it's all core and everything like that.
Right.
So, yeah.
I was like the other way around. Like they do all this like cool coordination, calisthenics kind of stuff. And when it was time to apply some force and have some power in your movements, I honestly felt like a hummingbird. It was crazy. And I was surrounded by these beasts. All of my colleagues were people who lived in the Caribbean because they didn't want to be in Canada or in the States or Latin America. And it's a really interesting lifestyle because you only work half a day. And then you have the rest of the day to lift weights and lay around on the beach. And everyone was in beast mode. And I was just like, I just can't do that. So I started lifting weights and just fell in love with it. I just loved it. I thought it was so empowering. It's like I had tapped into an ability that I didn't know was in the human body.
Was this helping your back pain at this point?
At this point, it started helping my shoulder pain tremendously.
Good. Okay. Yeah.
So for the first time in my life, my shoulders didn't feel... Because I would get such incredible shoulder inflammation, I couldn't put my clothes on for like 3 months out of the year. I had to sleep with ice packs.
Really?
I mean, it was brutal how much inflammation I had in my shoulders. And going back, I probably shouldn't have been eating grains.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't have been vegan for years, but I did it all. It's awesome. So then I started lifting and I just fell in love with it. And I remember this woman coming up to me in the gym and saying, I think you seem like you know what you're doing. Can you help me with my arms? And I did something with her. I think we did tricep extensions or something ridiculous like that. But it was so empowering for her. She was like, oh, thank you. I finally get it. And I was like, oh, I kind of like showing people what to do in the gym. So I came back and went to the sports academy in Bulgaria and got I think I spent 6 months there and got as much education as I could there. And that kind of put me on the personal trainer path. And so I taught English in the morning and I did personal training in the afternoon. And after a while, I was like, oh, I dread my mornings and I love my afternoons.
Yeah.
And so it was one of those classic, became a personal trainer, worked at someone's gym, then opened their own gym. And I had my own gym for years with a partner. And it was fabulous. We opened the first personal training facility in Bulgaria.
Wow.
I can proudly say now that the really good personal trainers who have their own facility back home then worked for us and we trained them. So we started this whole trend that's just illuminated the country. It's very cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that just kind of took on its own life. You probably see it with your patients. Your interest grows with your patient population. So we were getting more and more people with pain. We're getting more and more pregnant people.
Yeah.
We're getting more and more special populations. And our trainers were like ex-Olympians, and they were like, I don't care. I'm not dealing with this lady with back pain. I don't want to train. Like, there was so much fear in those athletes that were our trainers that they didn't want to deal with it, and they didn't want to have the emotional impact of it either. And I just loved being with people in pain. It made me feel like my life was serving people beyond what they look like. And I just felt called in a way to be a larger support than just abs and biceps. Not that how you look isn't important. To some people, that is what gets them through very difficult times, is really being focused on something outwardly. But I was just such an empath. I've always been a very empathetic, and I've always been able to feel with people their pain. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I can actually do more of this. So I did just special populations, and I was very lucky to have both my coach, who's a physical therapist here in the States. We distance worked for years. And my physical therapist in Bulgaria really support me in learning how to work with people in pain, because you don't learn that as a personal trainer. I think if people knew how little personal trainers know about health, like gyms would just empty.
Oh, yeah.
Very quickly. We have an illusion that because they look healthy and they function better than we do, that they know something, but they don't.
Right, yeah.
You see all of us trainers as patients, you know what the shape we're in. And so that was that. Years and years and years of working with people in chronic pain and acute pain, and I just loved it. There was this portion of my life in my late 20s that I exclusively worked with pregnant people. Like, I worked with probably hundreds of pregnant women and was teaching in a pregnancy school. That was amazing.
What techniques were you working on these pregnant women with?
I think that at the time, what I knew was mostly your run-of-the-mill physical therapy or corrective exercise modalities.
Gotcha. Which does still work wonders.
It does really work wonders. Like, even if you look at the classical, like Yanda's postural guidance, a pregnant woman doesn't look that much different from somebody who has an excessive anterior pelvic tilt and is in that scissored out position with the ribs flared and the rib cage posteriorly tilted. You have in a pregnancy what you have in a normal body. It's just magnified, right? It's like you've put a big magnifying glass on the tendencies that the body had anyways. If somebody wasn't right rotating in their rib cage when they walk, they get pregnant, they don't right rotate even more. It's just, it just gets bigger. And so from what little I knew at the time compared to my broader scope and kind of lens and bird's eye view right now, I was doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I had really good support. I had great physical therapists at my side that I could ask. And I think that's always been something that's allowed me to learn, is I have always felt like others can be a support in the areas that I feel like I can grow.
Definitely.
And so asking questions, emailing, constantly being online, because Bulgaria didn't have it. I was like the only person that had ever dared put a pregnant woman in a gym.
Right. Yeah.
And constantly online, constantly on a forum with other physical therapists and other trainers who know how to do it, constantly emailing my teachers, and just really being curious. I was mailing x-rays to the States. That's how, at the time that there wasn't a technology that I could email an x-ray, I had to actually physically mail it.
Yeah.
So I was just dedicated to figuring things out. It was great.
I think that's why what makes you so good too is because I feel like a lot of people are either scared to ask for help or they just want to do it by themselves. Like, I'm going to do this by me. And I think where you really grow is you have so many resources around you and so many people that know. So if you sit down and pretty much talk to anybody, you can learn a lot about anybody. Yeah. And
absolutely.
You used all those resources your entire life to help you get where you're at.
And I think that's the part that it makes it really a benefit, being from a part of the world that's so knowledge hungry.
Yeah.
And so, we didn't have books growing up or education materials like kids do now. And so when you could get your hands on something, it's gold.
Yeah.
At university, we were studying from copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of illegally Xeroxed material, because that's the only way you can pass your exam.
Yeah.
And sometimes you had to read in Russian because the literature is not in my language. So it makes you really willing to get to information And I'm also very client focused or patient focused for you, where to me, it's not my work that's important. It's the path of the person that's important. And sometimes I'm not the right person at the right time. So unless you know what else is out there, you pretty much are not in a good position to support the person.
So now you're working with pregnant women in Bulgaria, doing the physical therapy. How did you grow out into what you do now? And how did you find all that interesting stuff?
I worked, as you can probably guess from just my personality, I threw my candles in the fire.
Right.
I worked owning that facility, teaching, writing, traveling, learning. And I was married at the time to my first husband. And that was in its own way a challenge. And so I just really worked myself sick. So I was 28 years old when I finally got so sick that I couldn't work.
Really?
So I had to take a few months off, just the stressors of life. I was going through a divorce and my personal training business. My partner and I had some disagreements. And that was all it took to tip me over the top. And so it was like the tipping point. And so I had to make some very difficult decisions and choose not to be an owner at the gym anymore, pull my interest out, just train people for a while. And then I was like, I can't even do that. I had so little left inside of me. And so I took a few months off and then kind of had to regroup and see, okay, now that I'm going to be going back into it, what do I want to do? And that next year, I met Roland, who's my husband now, and we met at a fitness conference and we had an idea to write a book together.
You guys met for the first time at the fitness concert and then just really hit it off and then stayed in touch?
We knew each other for about 5 years from before that.
Oh, okay,
we were in the same online communities, but we met for live for the first time the next year. And we had this idea to work on a book together. So I came to the States and drafted our first book, Man on Top, together that winter. And that sort of put me on a different path. Well, I was like, wow, I actually, even though I'm really young, I have so much experience. There's actually things we can start teaching people. And so that really kind of opened the door to writing and writing more. And then a few years into that, I think at the same time that we're writing Man on Top, I met Katie Bowman, who's my mentor and dear
I've
friend.
Heard you mention her a couple times,
And she's a biomechanist, and she's somebody who's really interested in movement ecology. She's an incredible communicator, and she's really interested in how humans and movement interact biologically and biomechanically, and how our health is really dependent on our environment. And how we as people, since hunter-gatherer times, we have these structures, these physical structures that our lifestyle can no longer support.
Yeah.
And since I was still doing quite a bit of work with pregnant women, and she did quite a bit of work with the pelvic floor and the pelvis in her dissertation, I joined her to learn more about pelvic floor health and how overall body movement affects pelvic floor health, not just what pelvic floor physical therapists do, which is the more local work, but the more global work. Like, how does your ankle affect your pelvic floor?
Right.
And I was just fascinated. And so I became her student. And by the time I moved here in 2011, it was time to certify with her and to graduate after my 2 years of learning.
And is that where your movement specialist, is that where that comes from?
That's where I did my restorative exercise specialist work with her, graduated from the Restorative Exercise Institute, which is now, it has a different name now. Now it's called Nutritious Movement Center. And so I moved at the time that I was certifying with her, jumped right on to the path of starting to teach other teachers with her.
Right.
And I was just in the right place at the right time. I tell my colleagues, there's nothing that I'm that exceptional about. It's just Katie was growing and she needed more master teachers, and here we are. And so it's been an incredible privilege learning with her, learning from her, growing the work and integrating restorative exercise and her view of movement ecology into the other work that I do. And it's just been amazing. The thing that really warms my heart is that not only have I been able to get that body of knowledge and other pieces since I came to the States in the last 6 years, but it's been a really quick integration into my practice, and I've really been able to benefit from everything I've learned.
You absorb it all really fast and start applying it like right away?
I do. I don't struggle with with that. People struggle so much with it, and it seems like it's not an area. I have other areas of struggle, but that's not my area of struggle. And then we have now, currently, this year in the Netherlands, we're going to certify another group of teachers together with Katie and my colleagues who teach. And we're going to have 12 restorative exercise specialists in Bulgaria.
Beautiful.
To me, if that's the only thing I ever do, that's enough.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you pretty much revolutionized the way they do movement specialties and physical therapy in Bulgaria.
I know. I think it's
amazing.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And, I can't take any credit for it, but I can take credit for introducing the idea and really loving each of those people who has shown interest and really honoring the way that they've shown interest. And I am so grateful to them that they've seen a spark in my work that they've been able to put up and just make a fire out of. It's so cool.
Yeah. So, Galina, what type of patients do you see? Like, who comes to you? Like, they find you, and do you see a pattern in your patients, or is it just very global in how they come in?
I do. Like we talked earlier, my work has so much been led by who comes to me. So 4 years ago, I went on this path of learning about the nervous system and trauma and how trauma plays out in pain and pain patterns.
Yes, I'm very interested in the trauma therapy too, yeah.
I know. So last year, I finished my somatic experiencing practitioner work and education and did a year of specializing in touch for trauma therapists. And now I'm on my next kind of leg of the journey, because it's almost like you're going around the world and you just have to stop and take a breather and then hop on the next plane. That's how I feel. All this learning feels like it's awesome. So I'm on this next path that's dealing with the very early trauma that happens, whether it's physical or relational or attachment, to us between 0 and 7 years of age, and how that affects pain patterns, and especially chronic pain and things like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, the really mysterious autoimmune conditions.
What type of traumas would people experience at such a young age that would stick with them and present itself in the physical pain body as an adult?
It's a very good question. It's very interesting because in society, trauma is such a new thing. Like even PTSD, 10 years ago was what? And now everybody knows what PTSD is. So developmental trauma is becoming that next thing that's going to be the next PTSD. It's going to be the next DSM. So more and more practitioners and psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and other people who work with mental health will be able to diagnose it better.
Right.
So I would say the most prevalent is medical trauma. So some sort of an intervention that happened either while mom was still pregnant with baby or right after birth.
Yep.
And that leaves a mark on the nervous system. So forever and ever and ever, the nervous system has this, until you come in and do some healing work, the nervous system has these patterns from really, really early life. For example, somebody who was a premature baby and had to be NICU, had to be separated from mom, is going to have a very different response when there's a loss in the family, or there's divorce, or they're in a minor car accident, than somebody who has had a pretty kind of more of a smooth transition out of mom into the world. Because the very transition of coming out and into the world is not an easy thing to do. You have to go from a warm environment into a scary new environment. You have to make a survival effort coming out. And that survival effort has to be successful. And if it's not successful, if somebody comes in and intervenes, if you're oxygen deprived, something happens to mom, you don't get to breastfeed, all of that. There's so many moving parts, and it's also tender and painful to people when they remember about it.
Do you think that could also go the other way too? Like, I was born 3 months early, and I was born in the neonatal unit, and I was 2 pounds, 15 ounces, and I feel like I react to stressful situations pretty well. I'm wondering if that's if you have to kind of figure it out at such a young age, you were separated and it's like a survival, an instinct. Do you think it can go the other way too, where it has to make you a little more prepared and makes you a little more prepared for situations that do involve a lot of stress and everything?
It may, in some areas, make you just superhuman, and in some areas still have you really vulnerable.
Definitely. Okay, I'd agree with that, yeah.
And so you may physically be very resilient, and you may emotionally be less resilient.
Right.
Or, you could do great if all these other pieces are in place.
But you're definitely lacking something you didn't get one thing, yeah.
Something might show up somewhere, and it might show up in your parenting. It's
right.
It's a very interesting area. And it's also important to define what it means to be doing well, because there's so many people who deal with stressors by not dealing with them.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I'm fine. And like 20 years later, you have, irritable bowel syndrome, and it's like, all right.
Yeah.
So there aren't rules in all of that, and everybody's going to figure out how to make a body their own way and how to handle environment their own way. Some of the most resilient, incredible humans have had horrible histories of trauma, and we see that throughout history.
Yeah.
And there's post-traumatic growth is a field of study that's very interesting.
Yeah.
But whenever you're looking at the kind of population that I deal with, which is pain and chronic pain, I have people who come to me, they're like, this has been hurting for 30 years. It's like, seriously, like that's like a part of the system now. And the pain itself is playing its own role in your system. And then we have to look and kind of untangle and see where it is that what we're seeing are patterns. And so now it's the shoulder, and then it's the knee, and then it's the hip, and then it just keeps kind of going around. And
like peeling back layers of an onion, just like you go through one thing and then the next thing presents itself.
Yep. And so that's not really normal. So what is happening in that system that it can't find a place of function that is stable, and there's homeostasis where people aren't symptomatic. And what I find happens when you've had a lot of stress as a little one, or even in your adult life, is we learn to cope. So things show up and you don't pay attention to them. So it's easier to disregard pain and symptoms and then become this really overriding personality that's always piling more on, always doing more work, always taking another project, because that's just how you do. There's this saying that Bedouins in the desert, that when they go very, very far or they go very quickly, they stop so that their soul can catch up with them.
That's very interesting.
And so in modern society, we're always going. And so you get a lot of people who don't have incredible physical resilience, who are going, and then they fall apart. And then they kind of put themselves together. They go to you, they go to me, they go to acupuncture, they go to, an osteopath, and they go to their Reiki person, and they go to yoga. They kind of pull themselves together, and then they do it again.
Yeah.
And that's just horrible, detrimental for the body long term, but you don't know any other way.
Right.
I mean, that's how I have functioned most of my life.
Right. Well, it happened to you, and you were lucky enough to get it right the second time and not fall back into that pattern.
It's a long-term process. It's a lifelong process of being willing to be aware and self-aware and go, oh, I just did 40 clients this week. Like, that's not normal.
Right. It's a lot, yeah.
Just being able to look at yourself and go, oh, I'm doing that thing.
Right. And you're not spending 10 minutes with people. You're spending you have hour and a half sessions.
Oh my
so 40
God,
people is a lot. Yeah.
I have crazy days, and they're lovely days, and I love my clients, but it's those patterns that we get into. And I think that metaphor of the wounded healer is not a metaphor at all. I think all of us doing this work, we have so much of our own growth to still keep doing. And that's what also makes us human and makes us get to know our clients quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
So you know where I work. My studio is inside a chiropractor's office.
Right, yeah.
And your lovely colleagues, Dr. Hafer and Dr. Tom, they deal with the most complex stuff. Because by the time you go to upper cervical chiropractic, you've pretty much tried everything.
Right, you've seen everybody, yeah.
It's an unconventional method. The investment is more than in other methods.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to dedicate yourself to a long process of becoming symptomatic again, possibly.
Definitely, yeah.
And so by the time their patients that I take care of come to me, they've been to 20, 30, 40 different practitioners. And a lot of them have lost faith that anything can be done. I was just finishing up a 10-session series with somebody who had plantar fasciitis for 8 years and who was in physical therapy twice a week for 8 years and didn't give up hope. Like, he just kept going.
That's amazing.
I was like, dude, you're amazing. Like, that persistence alone is what's going to get you better.
Right.
By session 6, he was pain-free.
That's amazing.
Not because I'm a genius, but because nobody had looked where I looked. And he has some serious abdominal challenges. He has an abdominal hernia that's rather large.
Yeah.
So his core stability is heavily compromised.
Yeah.
And so nobody had looked there. Like, nobody had looked above the man's ankle.
Yeah.
We're going to be becoming, as professions, as healthcare providers, more and more global, more and more holistic, more and more interdisciplinary. My last class that I took in biomechanics just 2 weeks ago we had PTs and OTs and OAs and Chinese medicine doctors, and wow, that's amazing. And trainers and massage therapists and, more the hippie voodoo kind of stuff too. Like we had we were all like one community that was learning together, and we were all learning about biomechanics. How cool is that?
One of the most interesting things that I appreciate so much what you did for me was when I broke my elbow, I was so concentrated on the elbow itself that I didn't even think to look at the shoulder and the actual bone that had the trauma, the humerus that actually, when you did that bone work on me, because when you said I banged my elbow, the bone just tightened up. And when I felt that release, when you did that, just that little touch on the bone, and when you just externally rotated my shoulder, the elbow pain, just dramatically went away. It just went away. It was all about stretching the shoulder, and I feel like a lot of people concentrate too much on the exact area of pain where it could just be, you've seen it,
totally.
Could be in the head or the ankle or the knee,
And that's why I love watching my clients walk so much. It's like, wow, walking is the most complex activity that you can do, and it can be beautifully graceful. And it can also look like really, really, really not graceful. It can be you can look like a pirate. And when people come to us, they oftentimes look like a pirate. And it's like, wow. And I have people with 2 knee replacements and 1 hip replacement that walk better than a lot of the people that come to me. And it's like, why is your body so hell-bent on being on the other side? Why does it want to put load over here, right? And usually we'll find that it's not the symptomatic side, it's the other side that has not been able to load because of something that happened 20 years ago. And it's interesting, my touch teacher, Kathy Kane, who is just phenomenal. She's the person who created touch for psychotherapy. It was not a thing in the world. It is now a thing. It's fabulous. She did that.
Can you just explain that really quick, what that is?
Yeah, you can check out Kathy Kane's work at somaticpractice.net. Kathy Kane, she was a body worker she was in Australia, and psychotherapists there needed a body worker to teach them how to touch their patients when they were going through something difficult. And so little by little, she developed over the last 20 years this really incredible body of knowledge and practice called Touch Skills for trauma therapists. And what Kathy's done is she's taught us how to work with systems, how to work with bone, how to work with fascia, how to work with muscle, how to work with a joint, how to work with the endocrine system, how to find out through touch if a liver and a pancreas are talking to each other, if they have communication, and if a liver and a pancreas and a spleen can work together. It's quite incredible. And touch, because you touch people every day, touch is like a weapon. In its most benign form, it's such an incredible tool because it allows the 2 brains to talk to each other.
Right. And the intention while touching is I learned that from you. The intention while touching somebody can be very powerful.
Intention and attention are the weapon's bullets. You have these incredible hands and you can touch people, and the intention that you touch them with and the attention that you put in a tissue changes the game tremendously. I was just working with somebody with a severe adrenal fatigue the other day, and his main symptoms are pain in his legs and adductors. And we were working on something completely different, and then his legs kind of flared up. And I was like, okay, I felt like giving some support to the legs might be a good path to explore.
Right.
And it's almost like you ask the body a question. Every time you do something, you ask the body a question, and you just see what happens. You keep open curiosity. You don't have any ideas about what's going to happen. You have to stay free of your own ideas. Otherwise, things can get boggled down pretty quickly. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put my hand on your quad and your adductor, and I'm just going to stay at the skin level. And you just tell me what you feel. And so we just had this conversation. So it's like I'm having a conversation with his tissues, but I'm also having a conversation with him. Not much was happening at the skin level. It was kind of warm, but nothing much was happening. It was a little bit buzzy. Nothing much was happening. I was like, okay, we're going to move 1 layer down. All I did is I moved my attention into the fascia. And the moment I did this, it was almost like, how when you put your hand in a river and you can feel the current?
Yeah.
And it was like... And I was like, okay, we might be in the right layer. We might be too much in the right layer. I might need to pull out a little bit.
Really?
Because you can put 100% of your attention and totally overwhelm the system and it can shut down. Right. So I kind of played with how much attention I put in there. I was like, okay, 50% of my attention in there feels about right. And he was like, are you pressing harder? I'm like, no, I'm like on top of his jeans.
Right.
It's like, I'm not doing anything. He's like, so much is happening. I was like, I know, because your body wants to have a conversation.
Yeah. That's crazy how you can do it through the genes too. Like whatever it is that gets through there, that is just crazy. That's amazing to me.
When I was learning this kind of like global way of touching fascia, I had a very interesting experience. I was sitting with I was standing and my hands were on someone's like lower leg, like shin area. And I just was just sitting there and I was just paying attention to their fascia and I was just waiting. And my brain was completely empty. Like meditation has done wonders for emptying my head. And so I was just like standing in open awareness and I could feel my own fascia around the posterior shoulder capsules pull back and like spiral out. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, my fascia is pulling on his right now and I'm not doing anything. And it was the wildest experience. I was like, I think my body knows what to do with his body and I'm just going to watch this. And it was like the Discovery Channel. It's like, what is happening right now? It was so
Galina,
crazy.
do you ever absorb people's energy too? Like, do you feel someone that's very tired when you're touching them? Do you feel like you're getting tired? Or if someone's in a lot of pain, do you absorb that as well? Or
no, I feel like in order to heal people and help people heal, I'm working with my English here, to help people heal and to help people find wholeness and function again, we need to join them in their pain. If you are with a friend and you're very sad and your friend doesn't get sad with you, it'll take a while longer for you to get better. So I feel like I feel like really feeling people's, like my gift is resonance. I can feel in my body what people feel.
Yeah.
And like sometimes people see images or, everybody who works in the healing world has their own way of languaging their work. For me, it's resonance. I can pretty much feel what people feel, both in emotions and in physical sensations. And that's my tool. If I don't feel with you what you feel, then I can't join you in integrating it into the next phase, which is, chaos to organization.
Right.
The important piece is that that's not my thing. And I'm very aware that that's not my thing. It's not my body's thing. It's not my process. I am joining you in your process as we both come out. Right. For me, however, that means that I have to have incredible presence.
Yeah.
I have to be super present and I have to be super grounded and I have to be super aware. Like my kind of core consciousness has to be really online and watch and know who I am and who they are so we don't meld.
Yeah.
That's a very important piece. It's like, how when like a cat lays on you sometimes and you just become one?
Yeah.
That's not what happens. We need to keep that separation of who I am and who they are.
You don't want that to happen.
You don't want that to happen, right? But you need to dip in and you need to take the swim with them in order to know because it's your brain essentially helping the process along.
How do you keep that distance, just being fully present?
You have to be fully present. You just keep just like when you're meditating, here's a thought and it goes away. Here's a twinge in my shoulder and it goes you know who you are in your open awareness, and that's where your identity is. Mm-hmm. That's where your present time awareness is. And then, there's things that are coming, but it's like Tara Brach has this great analogy where she says, you are the ocean and the things that are happening are the waves.
Yeah.
So you're watching the waves, but you are your own ocean and they are their own ocean and you don't need to meld your oceans. And then there's the other piece where that means my self-care has to be super on board. If I'm tired, if I haven't slept enough, if I didn't eat, if I had an argument that I haven't resolved, I cannot stay present as much as I need to be.
Yeah.
And my work doesn't feel good. And that's where I tank and I'll be working with somebody who's very symptomatic and they'll leave. And I have to lay on my floor and sleep for half an hour because I cannot keep my eyes open. That's how much it zaps me. But that's a sign that I'm behind on my self-care. Mm-hmm. That's a sign that I should have called my clients that day and canceled all my sessions. And I do that. When I don't feel good, I will call and cancel all my sessions.
It's beneficial for both of you. I mean, if you're not there helping them treat, then yeah.
Absolutely. And it's also teaching them how to do self-care.
Yes. That's what's beautiful about what you do too.
And it's setting an example of, I'm not going to be good support for you right now, and I'm not going to make myself go and do something that's not going to be beneficial to you, that's also going to zap me for the 30 other people that I have this week.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful process. It's an art. And we're all human. And in our humanness, we're constantly making mistakes. We're constantly imperfect. And we're constantly forgiving of them and keeping going.
Yeah, and that's what's great about what you do and what I do. We don't want people in the office 4 times a week. We want them being their own doctor, and if something goes wrong, we want them to know how they can fix it and help their own self rather than people being dependent on this person is going to make me feel good. I need to come here through. That's almost
very
scary. That's all, that's not okay. There's not a lot of healing taking place in that moment, I feel like.
I completely agree. I think that one of the things people lose with having a medical issue and in the medical system as a whole, and even in the alternative healthcare field, is their agency. Mm-hmm. They lose their agency and their ability to know themselves and to know that they have the ability to organize back to function. Mm-hmm. And when you have to constantly come in and I need to keep putting your neck back in, what does that tell you about your own body's ability?
Right.
It's like, I can't do it. Why can't I do it? What's wrong with me? So it sends this whole other message. If we can empower people to understand their bodies, to understand pain, pain education should be a thing in school.
Yeah.
To understand pain and how pain works, and that just because you have pain doesn't mean that blood's gushing somewhere and you're cut open and you're falling apart. Pain's in the brain. Your brain is making a decision right now to keep you highly alert. And it could be your mother-in-law. It might not be your elbow at all.
Right.
So learning about pain and the new science of pain and all of these things is so important. And I know you do a lot of education, and I do as well, to empower people. I don't want to see the same person. I want to see you for the time being that I can be your teacher, and then go learn with someone else. Keep growing your understanding.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So how important is nutrition? Do you guide people in nutrition when you're working with them? Or because I know you've written books on nutrition and everything.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I have is because I don't want to be a nutrition coach. I want to do my
read the
other
book.
work.
Figure it out.
Yeah, read the book. Here's my book. And my husband and I have an online program. It's like a course that anyone can take.
That's right, yeah.
It's a 30-day course that anyone can take and learn how to eat better for less inflammation. Nutrition is very important. You have to be living under a rock to believe that you can eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the drive-thru and not be in pain. And I think where nutrition really becomes interesting and specialized is where now you're eating real food and you have a whole food diet. And now you're trying to specify what's the greatest food for you, what really nourishes you, what keeps you pain-free, and really to find out the great offenders, whether it's dairy or it's alcohol or it's coffee, whatever the great offenders are, to, keep them to a minimum so that you're not getting slammed. Because people have such great lives to live, and it's just sad to see them taken away by a piece of pie. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people don't realize that not eating healthy, not only does it affect your physical body, obviously, but a lot of people don't. It can definitely mess with your emotions.
Everything. Just feed your kids some sugar and see what happens. For those people who don't believe that nutrition matters, it's like, give your kids cotton candy, watch them run around, and then cry and throw a tantrum. And we as adults cry and throw tantrums as well. They just look differently.
Definitely. That's very interesting. Well, Galina, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my God. This has been fabulous.
This is one of my favorite episodes. I learned a lot. I really
did. Thank you. Thank you for being curious.
Actually, I have one more question. I noticed it after you told me, when you were working on me, my stomach started growling. That somatic visceral response. And can you explain what's going on there? Like you said, it almost linked up.
Yeah, well, you know how, people know about fight or flight. And then the other side of that is rest and digest. That's like the simplest way to describe it. And so every complex system in nature goes from chaos to organization, from activation to deactivation. Your heart rate does it, your blood pressure does it, the sun does it, right? With the rotation of the earth. And so when you are in a stress response or in a trauma response, or you're running trauma physiology, usually you're in one of those more activating responses. So your body can't rest and digest. right? Your
Right.
body is
Right.
going, it has its resources pulled into the extremities, arms and legs, and, really trying to have all of your nutrients going to the outside and activities going to the outside so you could run away. Or if you are more in a freeze response, it'll be more frozen in your gut. That's all the vagus work that we can talk about some other time. But
Definitely,
your dorsovagal portion of the vagus nerve can kind of really keep digestion shut down for survival purposes. And so as in your case, as your body was able to let go of some of the activity in the arms, it was like, oh, I no longer need to be tightening up for that impact, right? Because we're kind of working with the impact to your elbow, which was still looping in the background, all this activation, like we must brace for impact. As that went away, your body goes, oh, I can totally start digesting my food right now. So you could hear your belly go, bloop, 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 right? It was starting to make some sounds. Yeah, I have my clients call me the belly whisperer, and it's not because I do anything with their bellies, but their bellies are always going.
I started noticing it, in my patients. I would just be doing neck work on them and stuff, and their stomach would just start rumbling. And then I remember you telling me something about it, but I just didn't know what exactly was going on, but I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, just tell them, hey, it's a good thing. Look at that.
Yeah, definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
Right? Yeah, and that's why visceral work is so amazing too. It's just, I love it all. I love it all.
Well, thank you so much, Galina. Do you have a personal website and a place where people can find you online? I know we said it before, but...
Yeah, the easiest place to come is to eatmovelive52.com, and that's where everything is.
Great.
Or the studio website is movewellstudio.com.
Great. Well, Galina, I'd love to have you back whenever, because you are a wealth of knowledge on a lot of things, and thank you so much for doing this. I really love this episode. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and gosh, good luck with everything you're doing. You're just so at the cusp of creating this incredible practice on the East Coast, and I know your grand opening is coming up soon.
It's coming up in July,
I know. And so it's just really sending you really good thoughts and gratitude for all the incredible work that you do in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Galina.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. My private practice is located in New Jersey at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. If you have any additional questions about today's podcast, other episodes, or any questions about Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractic in general, feel free to visit my website at drkevinpecca.com or subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Kevin Pecca. Hope you enjoyed the show. Cheers.